Hello, Raptors fans, and welcome back to Raptors Report. Today, we're going to be discussing the Toronto Raptors game against the Boston Celtics. But before we do that, I want to discuss a topic that is actually very germane to the game that happened last night, because in last night's game, the Toronto Raptors benched all of their starters and decided to play the bench, so the second stringers and the third stringers for the entire game. And so I think this is a really good opportunity to discuss the Toronto Raptors bench situation. And if you were a fan of the podcast, you will probably have heard this topic come up. But if you're not, watch the podcast. It happens every Monday at 8:30. Encourage you to check that out. The reason I bring that up is because Steve, my co-host, aka at Raptors Shack on Twitter, he mentioned that one of his predictions for this season was that the Toronto Raptors bench would finally win their minutes. And you might say to yourself, okay, so what? Well, the so what is that the Toronto Raptors have been unable to win their minutes off of the bench for pretty much since the championship. They have had a pretty poor bench for a very long time. And all you have to do really to win your minutes as the bench is to beat the other team's bench. So it's not like there's a big, huge mismatch there. It's really just, are you better than the average bench? And for the Toronto Raptors, that question has been answered with a no, a resounding no, for a very long time. But I think that things are going to be a little different this year, and I'm going to tell you why. So first of all, why do the Toronto Raptors have a bad bench? Or why have they had a bad bench? Well, one of the strategies that the Raptors have been using for a very long time, pretty much ever since Masai took over, is to use the bench as kind of an incubator for their draft picks and their young players. And I mean, the Raptors aren't the only team to do this. That's a very smart strategy for teams that aren't premier free agent destinations, because really you just have to have a way of getting talent onto your team. And the most surefire way of doing that is drafting well, scouting well, getting young players on your team and then developing them until they become, worthy rotation pieces. And they have done this for a very long time. I mean, Pascal Siakam, Norm Powell, Fred VanVleet, Chris Boucher, many others have been brought along in that way, where they get consistent bench minutes, refine their skills, play against other benches until, they're in their prime and they're ready to be, starters. A lot of those guys became starters either here or in other places. And that is pretty much the formula that the Raptors have followed for a very long time. Now, the problem is that if the talent isn't there, like it hasn't been the past couple of years, you're doing two things. You're going to be losing those minutes. So, you're going to be dealing with a deficit whenever you go to the bench. And number two, the development time is kind of wasted. It's like, planting a pebble and hoping a tree grows. It's not worth the time and effort. And the reason for that is because when the Raptors won the championship, they kind of had to, sell the farm a little bit. They had to empty the cupboard in order to acquire Kawhi Leonard, obviously, but also Marc Gasol as well. And some draft picks went out, some younger players and prospects went out the door in order to acquire those players, meaning that they had a talent deficit on their bench, and the starters who were good players like Siakam, Fred VanVleet, OG Anunoby, they weren't the problem. The problem was really that they did not have anybody to spell them off of the bench. But this season, after a few years of tanking, they've kind of restocked the cupboard, and it looks as if they are going to have some meaningful bench minutes and some potential players who could pop off and become rotation players and help them win minutes this year. So let's take a look. Grady Dick, Jacoby Walter, Ochai Agbaji, Collin Murray-Boyles, all of those players were first-round picks. Jacoby, Grady, and Collin Murray-Boyles were all drafted by the Toronto Raptors. Ochai Agbaji was drafted by the Jazz, but the Raptors acquired him. But the point remains that these players have a good pedigree. When it comes down to it, the majority of players who become rotation players are first-round picks. On top of that, some of the other guys that they've brought in, so like Jamal Shead, Sandro Mamukelashvili, Jonathan Mogbo, Jamison Battle, all of those players will have a chance as well to make an impact and show that they belong and maybe help win minutes. Obviously, it would be very optimistic, kind of unrealistic to expect that all of those players are going to play well this season. And also, some of those players might not play with the bench if and when an injury happens. One or more of them might have to be plugged into the starting lineup, and then a player who was behind them will move into their spot on the bench. So that sort of thing might happen. But clearly, the Toronto Raptors kind of have more bullets in the gun this time. So even if one or even a couple of players don't live up to expectations or, bust, don't look that good, it's kind of a numbers game. They've got more shots. They've got more kicks at the can to find contributors to play in that second unit. So that's one of the reasons. Now let's get into the players themselves, because I think it's interesting to discuss the roles, the opportunities, who's going to get minutes, who's not, all of that sort of thing. And one guy who I think is just going to get a ton of minutes this year is Jamal Shead. And one of the reasons that Jamal Shead is going to get a lot of minutes is because the Toronto Raptors are very thin with traditional point guards. So the two players that are going to be on the roster come opening night, Immanuel Quickley, Jamal Shead, they're really the only two players that are a traditional ball handling, bring the ball up, play the point of attack on defense players on the Toronto Raptors. So he, I think, is going to get minutes just by dint of being a real point guard. But I think it's more than that as well. I don't think it's just because he's the only guy. He has a lot of really good attributes that I think are going to help the Toronto Raptors this season. So Jamal Shead is an incredibly active defender. He gets into guys. He wants to get right next to the ball handler, put a ton of pressure on their dribble. He is a good help defender. He swipes at the ball, plays in the passing lane. And then there's the other thing that he does, which is creating turnovers. So there are ways that you can create turnovers, and he pretty much does all of them. So the first of which is, putting a ton of pressure on the ball handler and either getting a steal or a deflection, or a lot of the time just putting a ton of pressure on the ball handler will cause them to make a bad pass. Throw it out of bounds, throw it at a player's feet, throw it to the Toronto Raptors, that kind of thing. And also, there are the fouls and violations that he draws, because that's another way you can create turnovers, and he does that as well. So maybe he picked something up from Davion Mitchell, which is the ability to draw offensive fouls off of screeners. That is a huge thing that he does. Like, it seems like he gets at least one every game where he just runs around a screen very hard and absorbs the hit from the screener and kind of goes flying. And it is a very effective way of drawing offensive fouls and creating turnovers. Another way that he is able to generate turnovers is by forcing 8-second violations. So as I mentioned, he really likes to get up into players, and he does that before players reach the half-court line. He's very disruptive on defense, and I think that defense is going to help the Toronto Raptors play offense as well. So one of the things that they want to do, and one of the things that Darko has been talking about, is using the aggressiveness on defense in order to create transition opportunities. And the bench has a bunch of really good athletes. They've got a lot of really disruptive defenders. They are going to want to run. And so if you are able to create those live ball turnovers, that's how you do it. Jamal Shead can do that. I think it's going to help them get those transition buckets that they really want. Lastly, in the half court, he has some strengths and weaknesses. The first strength is really just that he can run the pick and roll, and he has good vision and good instincts when he's running the pick and roll. He is not the most efficient scorer. His shot is a little iffy, very feast or famine, and he's a little undersized, so getting into the paint and finishing will be difficult for him against, larger defenders. But I think that he adds stability to that group. He is a, willing distributor. He runs the pick and roll, just the bread and butter half-court play that a lot of teams like to run. And I think that he's going to bring some stability to the group in the half-court setting. When he's shooting off of the ball, so if he spots up, he can knock that shot down a little bit too. So very interested to see how Jamal Shead plays this season. I think he could be a sleeper. I think that he could be a guy that really surprises people. I know that a lot of people have been talking about the Raptors bench being an issue, especially in the national media, and I think a lot of them are sleeping on Jamal Shead. So we'll have to see this season, but I think he should get plenty of minutes to prove himself. Next up, we got to go with Collin Murray-Boyles. I think that Collin Murray-Boyles is going to get significant minutes. He'd probably get minutes anyway because he was the 9th overall pick, and lottery picks generally get to play the minutes even if they don't really deserve them. But I don't think that's going to be what's happening here, because I think he would be tough to bench even if he wasn't a lottery pick. He's an extremely cerebral player, really reads the game well, especially on the defensive end. He has great foot speed, really good help defender, and honestly, his hands are just unbelievable. Like the ability to pick balls out of the air, to bat balls out of players' hands when they're trying to dribble past him. He's just really good with that. He's a very willing help defender, also a good rebounder too. So he does a lot of things on the defensive end. He can guard on the perimeter. So we saw him just the other day lock up DeMar DeRozan when he was trying to create against him at the end of the first half against the Kings. On offense, he's going to be more of a role player. I think that's pretty obvious at this point. Maybe not long term, but I think this season he is going to be a screener. He's going to be a guy probably playing in the dunker spot. He is going to be a spot-up shooter, so a player who, just stands at the three-point line and shoots open jump shots, and then probably also being a connector. So he had 6 assists the other day. You don't need to dribble the ball too much. You don't need to be a point guard in order to get assists. You just need to find open players and make smart passes and reads. So I think that on that end, you don't really have to worry about anything, but I'm really excited to watch him play off of the bench. I think he's going to help Sandro Mamukelashvili because he's not as much of a traditional center. You're going to be giving up some rim protection there, but I think that CMB will be a good complement to him by helping out around the basket. Now, next up, I want to kind of talk about this group as a trio here. So I'm going to be talking about in this section are Grady, Jacoby, and Ochai Agbaji, because those guys are all playing a very similar position. They're playing on the wing, and all of them are going to be competing for backup, maybe even starters minutes this season. So I think there's going to be a lot of internal competition. So that's kind of why I want to bring them up together. So entering the season, I'm going to be honest, I was pretty cool on Grady in that, I wasn't as high on him as I had been in the past. He's been very inconsistent in his career. So the past 2 seasons, he played well for half the season and very poorly for the other half of the season. But he has come out in the preseason like gangbusters, especially the past 2 games. He's been one of the best players on the floor for the Toronto Raptors, and he has been showing some stuff. So his finishing has looked a lot better. I think he has gotten stronger. I think that he is more confident using his athleticism because he is an underrated vertical athlete. In terms of one-on-one defense, he has been kind of getting cooked a little bit in the preseason. But listen, he's doing a lot of good stuff. So I need to mention that, but he is doing a lot of good stuff. So his activity level has been really good. He is a willing help defender. He will rotate and provide help under the basket. He has been really just trying to go after rebounds. That is a big thing. If you don't have to be a star in every category, but you can't be one-dimensional. And the problem with Grady Dick in the past has been whether he has it going with his shot or not. And I mean, he is a shooter. I think that is his primary skill as a player and will be moving forward. But if he can add elements to his game that make it better when he's not shooting very well, it's going to be harder to bench him. So I think that he's shown me something in the preseason. And again, I was not super high on him coming into the season, I will admit, but he has shown me some stuff in this preseason, especially against the Celtics. I thought he looked great. And now let's talk Jacoby. Jacoby Walter has had a really strong end to last season. I think he looked way more comfortable on the floor. There was a bit of Mickey Mouse March going on. A lot of teams, rest players before the playoffs. A lot of teams are tanking. So, you can get a skewed idea of what a player is like in those sections of the season. But I'm liking what I'm seeing from him. When I watch him, there are a couple of things that I've picked up on that I think are really going to translate at the NBA level. You got to talk about the defense, first of all. His defense looks legit, and he has the size and length that you want from a wing defender, and his foot speed and hip speed, his hip rotation, are excellent. Throughout the end of last season, and especially in this preseason, he is one of those players that can stay attached to players. He had a really good possession against Anthony Simons last night, where Anthony Simons used a number of very advanced crossovers that looked like against a worse defender would have created an advantage situation. He would have been able to get past them. Jacoby's foot speed and ability to swivel his hips let him stay right on Anthony Simons. And even though Anthony Simons hit the shot, it was like a very tough fadeaway with a hand in his face in the mid-range, right? That's a low percentage shot that you take every time. He made the shot, but it was about just watching him play against a polished, very capable primary scorer and ball handler. Anthony Simons, one of the reasons that he is not looked upon as a premier piece is because he's one of the worst defenders in the entire league. But he is a good creator with the ball in his hands. And Jacoby smothered him, was right on top of every one of his moves. And that's just an example, but he is a really explosive and very fundamentally sound defender, and he is getting up into players. And I think that is going to be a big part of the Toronto Raptors' identity off of the bench, is having a bunch of guys who can get out and defend on the perimeter. So loved what I saw from him on that end. On offense, he had one good game and then a couple of like not so good games. So I think he really needs to work on his handle more than anything. I think that that is a number one. When he shoots an open shot, like does the role player stuff, he looks pretty good, although he is dependent on that three going in order to contribute at a high level off of the bench. I think that that, at least for this season, is going to be really big for him. If he wants to continue to get better on that end, if he wants to be more than a role player, the handle needs to tighten up. He does not look comfortable driving into the paint at all. And I mean, he's in his second season. It's understandable, but that is one area that I need to see him develop in if he wants to be more than a role player, because I like him and I think he's going to get minutes this season. Last but not least, I mean, you got to talk about Ochai Agbaji. Ochai Agbaji at the beginning of last season, he was too timid. He wasn't shooting threes enough. He would pass up open shots and he'd brick the ones that he took. He was just very unconfident. His defense was fine, but it looked like, you know, his days in the NBA were numbered. Last season comes around, he was one of the best players on the Raptors, in my opinion. He played most of the season and he was their most consistent three-point shooter. Like, he was just a corner merchant, but he was banging shots in the corner. So he's kind of an afterthought, I feel, like when a lot of people are talking about the bench, or if there's a, you know, we got to pick between these three guys, he's always the one being left out. But let me just say this, okay? Maybe his defensive potential isn't as exciting as Jacoby Walters. I think Jacoby has some, you know, real advantages there. I think that he can be a more disruptive defender than Ochai. But Ochai is a good defender, and he's athletic, and he's big and strong. Maybe Grady Dick's sort of three-point shooting potential is sexier, because he could be a movement shooter, and he can run off of screens and hit shots, hit more high degree of difficulty threes, right? But Ochai has been a consistent three-point shooter, especially last season and a couple of seasons ago. He has shown that he can do that for a whole season. So, like, his ceiling may not be as high as those other guys, but it looks like he deserves minutes. So it's going to be tough when you have to choose between these three players, because so either you just like balance all of their minutes and all of them get, you know, meager minutes, or you kind of, maybe you pick 2 out of 3. You say, sorry, these other guys are playing a little bit better. Maybe wait until there's an opening here. Maybe, you know, knock on wood, hopefully there isn't a lot of injuries, but next man up kind of thing. Like, you got to kind of prove it here. Or maybe you ride the hot hand. Maybe if one player is playing really well, you play them and you bench the other. It's going to be interesting to see how they treat this, because I think all three of these guys has the potential to be a strong rotation player this season. Now, I think we should talk about Sandro Mamukelashvili. There was a lot of hype for him before the season. Darko Rajakovic went out of his way to really talk up Sandro. In media day and in training camp, he brought him up multiple times as a guy who's going to be critical for the Toronto Raptors. And it's kind of similar to how the Toronto Raptors are thin at the point guard spot. And that is why I think Jamal Shead is going to get minutes. What Sandro brings is shooting in the front court. So the Toronto Raptors have bigs, okay? Scotty Barnes is, I consider him a hybrid big. Jakob Poeltl, clearly a traditional center. Jonathan Mogbo, new school big, like undersized big. CMB, undersized big. None of those guys shoot the three. Or, I mean, Scotty does, but it's not like a plus skill for him. CMB can and probably will shoot a lot of threes this season, but we don't know if he can contribute right away there. And Jakob Poeltl takes like 2 threes a year, even though he's like shooting like 66% on threes. So, but the idea here, what I'm saying is that I think he's going to get minutes by lieu of just being the guy in the front court who can play those C and power forward, who can shoot threes. What I said about Juancho Hernangomez kind of applies to Mamu. And what I said about Juancho was that he looks good. Like, he does things that I like on the court, and I think he knows how to play. If he can shoot 35% from 3, he will be an NBA caliber rotation player. Juancho shot 25% from 3, okay? So he was just a big 0 there. When I see Mamu and what he does on the court, so he's a good rebounder, you can give him the ball and he can handle it, especially attack closeouts and make plays for guys. Like, he's passing the eye test. When you watch him play, he looks like an NBA player. With that said, he's not the greatest rim protector. He isn't a traditional C. The reason you would play him is because he can stretch the floor for the other players on the team. And if he's going to see major minutes, and I hope he does, it will be because he is at least a passable three-point shooter. If he's like, say 36%, I think he will be like a 15-minute per game player, at least, because the Raptors really need a player like that. I think that he has other elements. I don't think he is like a complete zero in any category. He's not like a limited player, but obviously you want to be able to see that three-point shot come along. Lastly, I'll talk about Jonathan Mogbo, because I think he's the guy that right now I think is the odd man out. And he got some pretty substantial minutes last season when the Raptors were kind of injured and they needed someone to play the big position. I do like him, and especially certain aspects of his game. I think he is a good defender, like just an actively good defender who can guard on the perimeter, track players all over the court, pitch inside and make plays under the basket. He's a pretty good rebounder. He plays into the style that the Raptors want to play, which is creating turnovers and getting out in transition. In the preseason, at least, his finishing has looked better. So that is one of the issues with him, is the offensive side of the ball. And I'll tell you how he can improve that. And if I see those things from him, I think he could be, a bit minute player, maybe like 8 to 10 minutes a game, is that he needs to be a better finisher. Last season, he was not a good finisher around the rim. He would try and get it on the rim and pray. This season, it looks like he's a little bit more polished. So the shots that he's taking, like he's had a couple of nice scoop shots. He's had a couple of nice layups where he just gets it on the glass in the right spot and it drops through. I think he's been finishing better. So hopefully that continues. The other is that he just does not have the handle to be dribbling the ball as much as he does. He is almost a guaranteed turnover when he handles the ball against pressure. He had 5 turnovers last night. It was pretty ugly in the first half and even into the third half. He did have a good end. We'll discuss that. But this has been a consistent theme. I think that he wants to help the Raptors generate buckets. And he knows that he's not a creator, but he wants to be more than just, a guy who you put in the dunker spot. He's trying to audition to show that he can help run the offense. And the unfortunate part is that if there's a player between him and the basket and is even putting like average pressure on him, he will dribble and lose the ball without the other player having to make, an outstanding defensive play. It's a mistake, essentially, by Mogbo when he loses the ball in those situations. I think he's just got to dial it back and only really dribble the ball if it is a situation like a wild closeout where he already just has a baked-in advantage and he doesn't have to beat anyone. I think he can do that kind of stuff, but I just want him to cut the dribbling out. And I'll talk about what I see is missing from the Toronto Raptors bench. So the Toronto Raptors, those are a lot of players that I just mentioned that have, a decent chance of becoming minutes winners. But the Toronto Raptors bench is missing a pretty critical type of player, and I think it's going to limit them in certain situations. So a lot of the time, the way benches work in the NBA is that you have like a sixth man type player. And what that generally is a ball dominant guard who likes to score. Okay. That has how it has been for the past, 30 years. I think it's evolved recently, but you got a kind of microwave guy, a guy who can handle the ball, a guy who can create shots for himself and his teammates, but maybe likes to shoot a little bit more than you would expect a point guard to. That's kind of what a sixth man is generally. And the reason that you have that kind of player is that they come in the game when the starters are out. Even if the show is a one-man act, at least there's a show going on, right? Maybe he's not getting everybody involved, but you just need somebody to kind of raise the level of the bench and keep it at a certain level so that you don't get these long stretches without anybody creating a basket. That's what the Raptors are lacking right now. Jamal Shead, I think, is going to play that kind of role where he has the ball a lot, and it'll be more of a distribution role, and it'll be more of trying to get buckets in transition. I think that is really going to be the bread and butter of the bench, is transition basketball. And the Raptors were already one of the most transition reliant teams last season. I believe they were top 3 in attempts on transition. But this season, what I'm hoping for is that they just become better at it. They tried a lot. They were very inefficient on that play, which tells me that they're forcing it. They are trying to generate as many of those possessions as possible. This season, I want to see the aggressiveness, but I also want to see the execution. I want them, maybe if they can't get a bucket in transition, just don't force it, just pull it back out again, see if you can create a basket in the half court. But yeah, there's a lot of things that we could talk about with the bench. I hope I've touched on enough of them that you're a little bit better informed. But we are going to get to the game that happened last night because it was a very exciting one. The Toronto Raptors defeated the Boston Celtics. A really exciting game. In any case, it's always great to get a dub over the Boston Celtics, even though this was just kind of not a serious game. Like, this is like the Raptors only played their bench. The Celtics were holding out Jaylen Brown. Yeah, I mean, I think Peyton Pritchard looks like he could pop off. He could be a really good player for them. He always lights up the Raptors, but he's being given a longer leash this year. We'll see if he's able to capitalize on that. I thought it was a fun game. I really wish Collin Murray-Boyles did not get injured so quickly into the game. I was salivating at the beginning of the game that I was going to get to see him like 30 minutes. Next up, the Toronto Raptors play the Washington Wizards tomorrow at 3 o'clock, so a matinee game. It will be in Washington. The Washington Wizards, they have a lot of interesting prospects. I'm going to be interested to see how the Raptors play against them, who is going to be healthy for that game. That'll be a storyline. So I'll be tuning in on Sunday at 3 o'clock. And yeah, that is the episode. Hope you enjoyed it. The bench is obviously a big topic of conversation for the reasons that I pointed out. I want to see some of these guys succeed. That's really what it's about for me. So I'm going to be watching the bench with a pretty sharp eye this season, and I think you should too. And one of the things that I have done recently was that I have created a Discord channel. Please join if you're a Raptors fan. I have the link in the description. And if you haven't already, please like and subscribe and hit the bell icon so that the algorithm knows that this is content that Raptors fans enjoy. And as always, thank you for tuning in to Raptors Report, your source for in-depth Raptors content.